Be on your guys' responses of who you consider between the Bulls' 3 number 7 draft picks to be the most valuable in terms of their future potential and their impact that they'll have to the future of the Bulls franchise. And the results were interesting. Initially, I was a little surprised by it, but honestly, after putting together this video, it does actually make a little more sense now. And even myself, I tend to agree with the results. So what's going on, everyone? You are listening to Bulls Central here. Hope you're all doing well. So I made a video a while back, I think it was about 2 months ago or so, in which I talked about the concept of tanking in the NBA and how I myself, as a Bulls fan, have never been on board with tanking, partly because unlike most of the other major sports, the team with the worst record in the league is not guaranteed the number 1 pick or even a top 3 pick for that matter. Even more recently, the NBA changed the draft lottery rules, which spreads out the odds of getting a top pick more evenly among the worst performing teams in the league. And this was done to disincentivize franchises from tanking because your odds were now even lower of landing a top pick if you end up being one of the worst teams in the league. Now, the other reason I don't like the concept of tanking is because, quite frankly, it's hard as a fan to see your team be intentionally bad. Now, I know the players are never going to intentionally throw games. They're incentivized to play well so that they can secure larger contracts, and at the end of the day, they're professional athletes. They're born competitors. They want to win. But that doesn't take away from a franchise's front office intentionally making your team bad for a few years by building through the draft. But as a fan, you never want to see your team be in a long state of rebuilding. You want to see your team do well. And it's even more frustrating that when your team is quote-unquote tanking, the ping pong balls don't fall your way and you end up getting screwed in the lottery as a result. For the Bulls, that very first number 7 pick, which resulted in drafting Lauri Markkanen, that wasn't a year where they tanked to get that pick. That was actually the Timberwolves draft pick that they used, or that they traded to us, along with Lavine and Chris Dunn in exchange for Jimmy Butler. In 2018, the Bulls were shooting for a high draft pick in a draft class that featured prized possessions like Luka Doncic, DeAndre Ayton, and Trae Young. The Bulls ended up winning a little too many games and fell to the number 7 pick in the lottery, which they then used to select Wendell Carter Jr. The following season, the Bulls shot for another top pick in the draft that was really a top-heavy draft, and guys like Zion Williamson and John Morant. The Bulls yet again got unlucky, despite this time actually losing more games than they did the prior season, but again falling to the number 7 pick, which they used to draft Coby White. Now, I won't get into, who the Bulls should have drafted at those spots based on who was available at the time and what would have made more sense for the roster, because at the end of the day, these were the 3 guys the Bulls drafted. And to go back and try to revise history somehow and talk about the if only we had drafted X player over Wendell or Coby, although those hypotheticals are fun to speculate on, and I've done that in a few videos here and there. Maybe in the future I'll make a dedicated video on what the Bulls would have looked like had they, say, drafted Donovan Mitchell over Lauri Markkanen or Michael Porter Jr. over Wendell. But for the purposes of this video, we're going to talk about the 3 guys we have, the 3 guys GarPax selected for better or for worse, and who of those 3 has the most potential based on what we know today and what makes the most sense for this Bulls roster going forward. So as you can see from the results of the poll, Coby White came out well ahead, followed by Lauri and then Wendell. Now, I think part of the reason for this, and I actually agree with it, is because Coby White has actually been able to stay healthy. He has yet to miss a game due to injury in his career. He actually had a few injury scares in just the past week, which he had to leave the game for a period of time, but ended up returning to the floor shortly thereafter. And I do think that's valuable when you're considering the future potential of a player and their impact on the Bulls, because at the end of the day, as good as Lauri or Wendell are or could be, their impact isn't worth much if they're not available to play, plain and simple. The other thing about Coby White, as much as a lot of Bulls fans love to hate on him, while others hype him to the extreme, which, by the way, that in and of itself is surprising to me, and how polarizing he's been among Bulls fans and the differences in opinion people have on him. But despite all of that, Coby White, for only being in his second season, has actually looked promising for a 20-year-old second-year player. Now, I still maintain he's not fit to be a playmaking point guard and would be much more successful as an off-ball guard, even if he came off the bench. But the fact of the matter is Coby is among some of the best sophomores in the league in terms of the kind of numbers he's putting up. He's averaging close to 16 points per game, 5 rebounds and 5.2 assists. I mean, for all of his flaws on defense and poor decision making on the court, not being the best playmaker, those are solid numbers for a second-year player. Obviously, still a lot of things to work on based on the areas I just mentioned, but he's been a productive player in a number of aspects on offense. And more importantly, knock on wood, he's been healthy, and you can't say the same for the other two guys in Markkanen and Carter Jr. Now, I think the thing I find that's tricky between these three players is that, health aside, which I know health is an important factor, but let's say for a moment, health aside, there are two guys that don't really fit this roster all that well based on their positions or which positions they're best suited for and what's already covered from other guys on the roster, and that's Coby White and Wendell Carter Jr. For Coby, as I just mentioned, I think the experiment of having him be a playmaking point guard likely isn't going to be a long-term sustainable solution. It's becoming more and more clear how much more effective he is as a two guard playing off the ball. The problem with that is the Bulls already have Lavine at shooting guard, who is far better than Coby at that role, which would mean that Coby White would need to come off the bench, which isn't a bad thing, but I do think it would limit his overall growth and productivity, and he would not be used to his fullest potential. And you have Wendell Carter Jr. on the other hand, and I do really like Wendell a lot. I think Bulls fans give him a little too hard of a time more often than not, and I feel like his value isn't appreciated or noticed as much as it should be. And part of that is because he's playing a role that he's not really meant for. He's undersized to be a center in the NBA, not just his height, he's 6'9", there's other centers that are 6'9", but also his strength. He's 270 pounds when he's going against guys that have anywhere from 20 to 40 extra pounds on him. And I've said it plenty of times, but I do feel Wendell is better positioned as a power forward rather than a center, despite the fact that he plays his role well, given it's not what he's most comfortable with. And if you've been following the Bulls, between the two things they need most is a strong defensive traditional big man, and then playmaking at the guard position. And part of that is because of the fact we have Wendell starting at center and Coby White starting at point guard. So that's where Lauri Markkanen comes in, because he actually fits the role as a stretch four nicely. Obviously, he has flaws to his game as well that he needs to work on, namely his defense and post-up game, but he shoots well from outside and has actually shot the ball consistently this season, unlike this past year, and has also improved his inside game. But he's had issues staying healthy and being available to play. And if we're thinking of a player's future potential and impact on the Bulls going forward, well, one of the biggest things is you have to consider their health. Obviously, my hope is that both Lauri and Wendell will start being able to play and stay consistently healthy for over a course of an entire season or multiple seasons, really. But until we see that, I have to agree with you guys on your take in that of the three, I would go with Coby White as being the one having the most future potential and upside in terms of impacting the Bulls' success going forward, again, because he's healthy, followed by Lauri because he fits the roster well in terms of his position and his ability to spread the floor, which is needed in a system like Billy Donovan's. But his health issues, again, are more of a concern, as it doesn't mean much if he's not able to play. And then finally, Wendell, who, again, I think is a great player, and I do think he has potential to be a solid big man in the league, but likely in a different role on a different roster, and I'm not sure he fits the Bulls' plans long term. I know a lot of you guys have already been leaving your comments on this topic on the original poll question, but let me know what you guys think of my assessment of the three and their long-term impact. Let me know in the comments. The Bulls will be taking on the Nuggets later this evening, at least at the time of this recording. It's still happening. You can never really be too sure anymore with the nature of the season, but I'll have a live game chat here on the channel as well as the Discord, so be sure to check those out if you're interested. Also, be sure to subscribe if you're a Bulls fan and you enjoy daily Bulls content. Thanks again for tuning in, guys, and I will catch you in the next one.